Most people know Ian Fleming as the creator of James Bond, the suave, ruthless, martini-sipping spy of Her Majesty's Secret Service. But what fewer people realise is that Fleming wasn't simply imagining Bond's world. He lived in it. From the Admiralty's secret Room 39 in wartime London, to covert missions in Lisbon, commando raids in Nazi-occupied Europe, and one of the greatest deception plots of the Second World War, Ian Fleming's wartime career reads like a plot of a Bond novel, only it all really happened. This is the story of Ian Fleming's Secret War, and how it shaped the most famous spy in fiction. Long before Ian Fleming was dreaming up spy missions for Room 39, he was a rebellious teenager struggling to find his place in the world. Born in 1908 into wealth and privilege, he was the second son of Valentine Fleming, a Conservative Member of Parliament and British Army officer, who was killed in the First World War. His death left Ian in the care of his strong-willed mother, Evelyn, who had high expectations. Fleming attended Eton College, where he shone at athletics and writing, but clashed with authority. His rebellious nature, and an alleged affair with a maid, led to his early departure from the school, a source of embarrassment for his family. He then enrolled at Sandhurst to train as an army officer, like his father, but again Fleming didn't last long. He found the rigid discipline stifling and left before commissioning. Hoping to refine his future, he was sent to study languages in Munich and Geneva, with the goal of entering the Foreign Office. But after months of study, Fleming failed the entrance exam. This string of false starts led to a career in the City of London. He became a stockbroker with Rowan Pitman, one of the most reputable firms of the time. But Fleming found that work dull and struggled with the routine. He later moved into journalism, joining Reuters, and here he showed real promise, reporting on a Soviet show trial in Moscow in 1933. He had a nose for a story and an instinct for intrigue, traits that would serve him well later on. Still, as the 1930s wore on, Fleming remained a man in search of a cause. He had intelligence, charm, and a talent for observation, but he certainly lacked direction. That direction would come with the Second World War. In the spring of 1939, as tensions in Europe deepened, the Royal Navy began assembling the sharpest minds it could find to prepare for the oncoming storm. And one of those minds belonged to Ian Fleming. He was recruited by Rear Admiral John Godfrey, the newly appointed Director of Naval Intelligence. In his 50s, Admiral Godfrey was a seasoned naval officer, having served in the First World War and later as a skilled staff officer and director of plans. Before the war, he'd commanded the battlecruiser HMS Repulse before being appointed into his current intelligence role. Known for his blunt manner and encyclopedic memory, Godfrey was not always easy to work with, but he was a visionary, and he saw in Fleming a rare mix of intelligence, connections, and creativity. It was Godfrey who became the model for the fictional M in Fleming's Bond novels, the gruff, no-nonsense chief who commands from behind a desk, but whose orders reach the farthest corners of the world. Fleming was installed in the Admiralty's top-secret intelligence hub, Room 39, located within the old Admiralty building in Whitehall. It was a small room, but his influence stretched across continents. From Room 39, British Naval Intelligence directed espionage, sabotage and deception operations around the globe. Room 39 gave Fleming a front-row seat to the inner workings of British intelligence. It was here that he began to see how a single piece of information, a decoded message, a planted rumour, a forged letter, could change the outcome of entire campaigns. This was the world that forged the foundations of James Bond. Fleming's official title was Personal Assistant to the Director of Naval Intelligence, but in reality he was far more than a glorified secretary. In his early days there, he drafted top-level intelligence memos and operational briefings, as well as acting as a liaison officer with MI6, the SOE, Bletchley Park and Allied commanders. Sitting in on high-level strategic meetings, often absorbing more than he contributed, he began to sketch out ideas, bold, sometimes outrageous, for how to win the war in the shadows. Possibly his best-known idea was Operation Mincemeat. Among the audacious deception operations of the Second World War, Operation Mincemeat stands out as one of the very best. And though it was executed by Charles Cholmondeley and Ewan Montagu, the inspiration lay in a suggestion found in Fleming's 1939 Trout Memo. The Trout Memo was a short, sharp document on how to deceive the enemy, written in the tone of a field guide for a fisherman. It began with the line, "The trout fisher casts patiently all day. He frequently changes his venue and his lures. If he is frightened to fish, he may give the water a rest for half an hour. But his main endeavour, viz. To attract fish by something he sends out from his boat, is incessant." In it, Fleming and Godfrey laid out 54 suggested tricks, gambits and stratagems. Number 28 was especially striking. Plant false papers on a dead body and let it wash ashore to deceive the enemy. The plan was macabre but ingenious. A body was procured, that of a homeless Welshman, Glyndwr Michael, and disguised as a Royal Marine officer named Major William Martin. Attached to his corpse, a briefcase containing classified documents falsely outlining Allied plans to invade Greece and Sardinia. The body was set adrift off the coast of neutral Spain in April 1943, where it would almost certainly be discovered by German informants embedded in the Spanish authorities. And it was. The Germans fell for the ruse entirely, diverting their troops away from Sicily, which was in fact the true invasion target. The deception probably saved thousands of Allied lives. It would later be turned into a film, The Man Who Never Was, and more recently, Operation Mincemeat, starring Colin Firth. Whilst Fleming didn't plan the operation, the notion of planting false documents on a corpse was lifted directly from his Trout Memo. It's one of many moments where Fleming's imaginative leaps, dreamt up in Room 39, turned into deadly reality. Back in 1940, with Hitler dominating Europe and Franco's Spain walking a diplomatic tightrope, Britain feared that Spain might join the Axis. The consequences for the Royal Navy would be disastrous. German forces could then seize Gibraltar, closing off the Western Mediterranean. Fleming was tasked with drafting contingency plans. The result? Operation GoldenEye. Operating from the Portuguese capital of Lisbon, which was a hotbed of espionage at that time, he established secure communications between Gibraltar and London in case Gibraltar was taken over, recruited agents inside Spain and Portugal, and prepared sabotage teams to wreck roads and railways if Spain declared for the Nazis. Though Spain remained neutral, the operation stayed active throughout much of the war, a hidden fuse waiting to be lit. Years later, Fleming would name his Jamaican estate after this secret operation, GoldenEye. Among Fleming's most theatrical plans was Operation Ruthless. The goal? Stealing a working Enigma machine or codebook from a German rescue vessel. The method? Crash land a German bomber in the English Channel. Disguised British officers posing as Luftwaffe survivors would await rescue, and when the German patrol boat arrived, the men would kill the crew, seize the vessel, and recover any intelligence on board. The Admiralty were intrigued, but after lengthy discussion, the plan was deemed too risky. The odds of surviving the crash, finding a boat, overpowering its crew, and returning with the prize were judged slim at best. Still, Operation Ruthless captures something essential about Fleming, a mind always thinking one step beyond, unafraid to propose morally ambiguous and sometimes outlandish ways to outwit the enemy. And in a war fought as much in the shadows as on battlefields, that kind of thinking mattered. Fleming's wartime world wasn't confined to Britain. He liaised with some of the most influential figures in Allied espionage. In New York, he worked closely with William Stevenson, the Canadian-born spy master codenamed Intrepid. Stevenson headed British Security Coordination, BSC, from an office in the Rockefeller Center, running propaganda and counterintelligence across the Western Hemisphere. He was everything Fleming admired: tough, resourceful, secretive. Many believe Stevenson was also the model for both M and for Bond himself. Even more consequential was Fleming's relationship with Alan Dulles, an American OSS officer based in Switzerland. Dulles would later become director of the CIA and a great admirer of Fleming's novels. In fact, Dulles once asked Fleming to advise on real spy gadgets. Fleming responded with a list: Poison darts, camera pens, exploding cigar boxes, all ideas that wouldn't seem out of place with James Bond's Q character. These friendships blurred the line between reality and fiction. Fleming's Bond wasn't created in a vacuum. He was distilled from the traits of men like Stevenson and Dulles, intelligent, ruthless, well-connected, and always one move ahead. In 1942, Fleming proposed a new kind of commando unit, not to hold ground, but to seize enemy secrets. And thus was born 3O Assault Unit, known as 3O-AU. These elite troops, mainly drawn from the Royal Marines and specially trained in signals, demolition and close combat, were designed to move fast behind enemy lines. Their target? Enemy headquarters, research centres, codebooks, radar blueprints and weapons prototypes. Fleming, though based in London, was deeply involved in shaping the unit's identity. He wrote mission briefs, identified targets and helped coordinate with other branches of the military to ensure 3O-AU had the support it needed. It was in many ways his own private army, a real-world incarnation of the kind of teams he would later describe in his novels. 3O-AU began as a small mobile force of fewer than 80 men, but expanded to over 200 by the end of the war. It was divided into sections that combined signals and cipher experts, explosives and demolition specialists, linguists and interrogators, and some frontline combat personnel. Each mission team operated semi-independently, allowing for rapid strikes in the wake of Allied advances. They were attached to conventional forces but operated under direct guidance from Naval Intelligence, often from Fleming himself. This model would become the blueprint of many of Bond's solo or small team missions in the novels. Think of Bond breaking into the enemy fortresses in Moonraker or retrieving vital tech in Thunderball. The link is unmistakable. Their baptism of fire came during the North African campaign. In ports like Algiers and Tunis, they raided enemy command posts and naval offices, recovering enemy code material and fleet deployment documents. The success in Africa led to new missions during the Sicily landings and the long slog up the Italian peninsula. In Sicily, 3O-AU targeted radar installations and captured advanced equipment that would be studied by British scientists. In Italy, they gathered intelligence on German shipbuilding and U-boat activity in the Mediterranean. Again, their work echoes Bond's reconnaissance of underwater facilities in For Your Eyes Only. It was at the D-Day landings in Normandy in June 1944 and in the months that followed that 3O-AU came into its own. Landing shortly after the initial assault troops, they moved quickly into Cherbourg, where they stormed the German naval headquarters and seized critical documents, maps and cipher machines. In Paris, they raided the abandoned Gestapo headquarters, scooping up thousands of files on collaborators, informants and Nazi political agents. These were later used by Allied intelligence to dismantle the German espionage networks. As the war entered its final phase, 3O-AU raced towards the heart of the collapsing Reich. In Bremen and Kiel, they targeted U-boat pens and seized data on the Type 21 submarine, a revolutionary design far ahead of its time. In the chaos of Germany's defeat, 3O-AU's missions were part commando raid, part treasure hunt, and part forensic sweep. They captured research on advanced radar, rocket technology, nerve agents, and jet propulsion, all of it vital for the post-war intelligence race. Bond's later battles to prevent the theft or misuse of cutting-edge weapons technology, as seen in Moonraker and GoldenEye, owe much to this period of 3O-AU's work. After VE Day, 3O-AU was disbanded. Its purpose fulfilled, but its legacy lived on. Some of its members would go on to serve in the Special Boat Service and early Cold War intelligence units. The unit's tactics, fast, targeted, intelligence-led raids, became a model for future Special Forces operations. Fleming would later say that James Bond was a highly romanticised version of a commando of 3O-AU. For all his contributions to Britain's secret war, Ian Fleming's service in Naval Intelligence was not without controversy. While admired by many for his sharp mind and daring ideas, others viewed him with scepticism and at times resentment. Fleming's rapid ascent, bypassing traditional military channels to work directly under Admiral Godfrey, raised eyebrows. Critics accused him of being a desk-bound adventurer, a man with flair, yes, but also with the luxury of connections. Winston Churchill, for instance, was a family friend. He had never fought on the front lines, yet wielded considerable influence over operations that put other men in mortal danger. His creation of 3O Assault Unit also sparked friction. Some in the army and SOE saw 3O AU as Fleming's pet project, a shadowy outfit that sidestepped traditional chains of command. There were accusations that its operations overlapped with other units, and questions about whether the intelligence it gathered always justified the risks taken. Then there were the ideas that went too far. Operation Ruthless, Fleming's plan to recover Enigma codebooks by staging that fake plane crash and killing the German rescue crew, was considered morally dubious even by wartime standards. It was never executed, but it revealed a streak of dark pragmatism that would later define James Bond's approach to espionage. Yet, despite these criticisms, few denied that Fleming brought something unique to the war effort: imagination, innovation, and a novelist's eye for detail and drama. In the world of wartime espionage, where nothing is quite as it seems, Ian Fleming was both player and storyteller. During the war, Fleming had attended an Anglo-American intelligence meeting in Jamaica. He fell in love with the Caribbean island, and after the war moved there, purchasing a stretch of land on the northern coast and building a home that he named after his wartime operation, GoldenEye. There in 1952, he sat down to write the novel that would change his life. Casino Royale, published in 1953, introduced the world to James Bond, the hard-bitten British agent 007 who gambled with his life and drank with weary detachment. Bond's missions were wild, his adversaries colourful, and his methods ruthless. But underneath the style and spectacle was something very real: Fleming's understanding of intelligence, war, and moral ambiguity. The novels poured out, one a year. Each one took inspiration from Fleming's wartime work. There were the secret Nazi files of Moonraker and underwater weapons tech in Thunderball. His stories included Smersh and Soviet assassins drawn from his wartime counterintelligence, and introduced us to a series of villains with scientific obsessions and megalomaniac tendencies, not unlike some of Hitler's own inner circle. Bond's world was an extension of Fleming's own, just with better suits, faster cars, and a licence to kill. In 1962, the very first James Bond film was released. Dr. No starred Sean Connery and was the first of 27 films to date featuring 007. A heavy smoker and drinker, Ian Fleming died from a heart attack in August 1964, aged just 58. He was buried at Sevenhampton in Wiltshire. Ian Fleming never parachuted behind enemy lines. He didn't kill with his bare hands or sabotage enemy headquarters, but he did shape some of the war's most imaginative operations. He did write the mission briefs for men who stormed U-boat pens and radar stations. He did sit inside the Admiralty's most secret room and draft plans that misled Hitler and changed the course of battles. And from these shadows, he created something extraordinary. A character who captured the imagination of the post-war world. James Bond was not Ian Fleming, but without Ian Fleming's secret war, Bond would never have been born. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed that story about the real events that inspired Ian Fleming to create James Bond 007. If you'd like to support my channel, then please consider becoming a member, a patron, or making a one-off donation. There's details below. I'm Chris Green, the History Chap. Thanks for joining me today. Keep well, and I look forward to sharing more stories from British history with you very soon.